Welcome back to module 5. So this is the second step in the tricep method, and this is about rewiring the brain. Now, a lot of this is based on the research from neuroplasticity, and as I mentioned, there's this fantastic book called The Brain That Changes Itself by Dr. Norman Doidge, and a lot of social anxiety is based on the concept of neuroplasticity. You have built up these patterns and these beliefs through many years, and neurons that fire together wire together. You create neural circuits in your brain, which, for example, me cannot go to hairdresser, go to hairdresser, hairdresser equals pain, humiliation. I come home, I avoid hairdresser, and that's like a normal circuitry. Or, you know, going outside equals scrutiny, equals judgment, therefore I stay at home equals avoidance, equals less pain. And these habits and these pathways get burnt into the brain. And they're like rivers. They form and they gouge out riverbeds, but they can be diverted and new channels can be carved into the rocks, into the brain, into the mind and into the brain. And this is the concept of neuroplasticity. The brain is not a solid set structure. It's a living organism, it's plastic, and it can change right up until the time that you die. And this is where a lot of people struggle. They think, I'm a freak, I've got social anxiety disorder. They might even not know that it's called social anxiety disorder. They're like, oh, I've just always been this way, I'm always going to be this way. I've seen people like that on forums, and they're entrenched in this mindset and they're depressed. They don't believe in the possibility of change, but there is serious scientific research around neuroplasticity. And it shows us that, you know, stroke victims and people who are seriously mentally disabled, people with who have lost their sight or lost their hearing, they find a different way to think and a different neural pathway. And if you've got social anxiety disorder, you can certainly find different neural pathways around these old obstacles that have previously stopped you. So neuroplasticity is a big part of overcoming social anxiety and rewiring your brain. You need to understand that change is always possible. Another key element of rewiring the brain for me was psychotherapy. So for me, a lot of this was talking therapy, and I found this very useful to understand who I was, my place in the world, how I'd come to be the kind of person I was, some of the family beliefs that had been passed down to me, how I was basically psychologically abused in the family, bullied and intimidated and dominated by an aggressive, overbearing mother, how I basically was traumatized by that and became quite a spineless, scared, weak, thin-skinned person who was always seeking approval and became a yes man and never wanted to go against, you know, against other people or say no or express my true feelings, and wanted to make people laugh and please them. So that really was a huge eye-opener, and I think talking therapy can be massive for that, just in raising your self-awareness, understanding your family context and how this stuff has been passed down, trauma from generation to generation, and how it lands on you. And the first step of change is awareness, and I think psychotherapy, just talking therapy, can really help with this. So that's the talking therapy I've done. And psychotherapy had such a big impact on me and changed my life in so many ways and changed my brain in so many ways that I'm now training to be a psychotherapist myself. And another form of therapy which I've experimented with is CBT, which you may be familiar with, cognitive behavioral therapy. And this really gets to the heart of neuroplastic change. It's all about your beliefs, you know. So that might be, I've always been shy, I've always been this way. And then you would take that belief and you would examine it and say, really, has there not been another time in your life when you weren't self-conscious? Where has this belief come from? Or, you know, I can't speak in front of other people. Okay, really, has that always been the case? What's a possible alternative narrative? And it gets you to take out and examine these software programs which you've basically been running, and give you the possibility to then start to run programs that are more conscious and ones that you want to run, rather than ones that are often inherited from families which are like, you were always the black sheep, you're just bad news, you've always been shy, you're the quiet one, you're unlovable, you need to achieve well, or you need to make me laugh in order to get my love. So all of these kind of beliefs and stuff that we build up as kids, CBT can really help us to extract those and change them. And another area of rewiring the brain is cognitive biases, okay? And our brain as humans, we run on a lot of cognitive biases. So for example, the negative attention bias. Something that is negative is going to get more of our attention, because to survive, you know, you might see 50 friendly faces. That's great. You're not going to put your attention there, but you see one saber-toothed tiger in the grass, your attention is going to go to that one negative thing, and that's what keeps you alive. The problem is, when you've got social anxiety, these cognitive biases can really work against you. For example, you get 10 good comments about a presentation that you gave, or you know, about anything about your appearance. You get one negative one and you ruminate on that, and then you don't want to go out of the house or go to that event again or go to work again, because you're like, that person made that comment, therefore I must be a piece of shit. I knew it. I knew people didn't like me. I knew I wasn't acceptable. That confirms the belief that I was given as a kid, etc., etc. So cognitive biases are really worth researching, looking at, and you can start to question them. It's fascinating stuff. And they really do have a big impact on how you interpret the world, right? The biases, the mind is the lens through which we interpret the world. And when we have a lot of cognitive biases, it can get a bit distorted. And that is what feeds social anxiety: maladaptive thinking patterns, irrational thinking, catastrophization, all of these things which are not really helpful and often very far from what is more sort of an objective reality, if you like. We can get a very skewed vision. Another thing that I want to talk about is pessimism. Okay, there's a fantastic book by Martin Seligman, which I recommend, called Learned Optimism. And this is really excellent. As social anxiety sufferers, we often become very depressed, very cynical, very negative. Watching this, you might be negative and cynical. What does this guy know? This is bullshit. This is another scam that I've seen on the internet. He's not going to be able to help me. We become very entrenched in our pessimism, okay? And this is often to do with 3 P's. So the first one, I don't know if you can see that there, it says personal. I apologize for the light on the board. And this is, we interpret things as personal, okay? Nobody replied to my comment on Facebook, therefore it must be about me. That person didn't text me back at the exact time I was expecting. That must be about me. It's not because they've got a sick child or because there's a million other things going on in the universe which affect other people. It's all about me. If I don't get the response that I want, it's because I'm not adequate. If somebody didn't, you know, reply to me or come to my party or do this or do that, it's because I'm a piece of shit and nobody likes me, and that's why I've got, you know, the problems that I have. So we interpret everything as being all about us. Social anxiety is often conceived as a form of negative narcissism. We believe everything revolves around us, but in a negative way. You know, you walk into a supermarket, you think everybody is looking at you like, what a freak, look, he can't even walk normally. They're not, you know, it's not all about you. It's not everything is personal, not everything is about you. Second P is permanent. I messed up. This is how it is. This is how I'm always going to be. I'm always going to have social anxiety. I'm a freak, and it's just, I'm always going to be like that. Okay? That's the permanent element of pessimism. And the third P is pervasive. This, you know, you think that these problems infiltrate and affect every area of your life. You know, I fucked up, and first of all, it's always going to be like this, and it's going to affect everything or everybody hates me. You know, it's pervasive. I'm not acceptable to anybody. I can't do anything right. I mess up all social interactions. Whereas if you examine them more carefully, you're very likely to find, well, hang on, there was that, you know, plenty of instances where you had a nice interaction, or you were able to stay calm, or you didn't have a panic attack, or that exchange with the cashier went quite smoothly, or you do have that friend, but we just blanket it all in a negative statement and a negative perception that it just covers everything. So it's all about me, it's always going to be like this, and it includes everything in my life. Those are the 3 P's. And the fourth, sorry, not the fourth, but another part of rewiring the brain is through exposure, okay, exposure therapy. And I don't want to get into too much detail about this now because I'm going to come into it later on. But by actually taking actions, this rewires the brain. You know, when you go out and you do something like lying down in the street, which I do and have done for fun and as an exposure therapy, you get an exhilarating rush and you realize that you're stronger than you thought you were, and that changes the pathway and that changes the view of yourself. So we're going to talk about exposure therapy later. There's loads of stuff on that and loads of stuff you can do. That's really what I wanted to cover in this part. Rewiring the brain is step 2 in the system, and it's a really crucial part because obviously all of your life begins with mind. Mind, you know, your outside environment is a manifestation of your mind. Pretty much everything begins with the mind. So you want to really examine your biases. You can always change because of the concept of neuroplasticity. The brain is plastic. I highly recommend psychotherapy, whether that be talking and or CBT. You would really be beneficial to look at your cognitive biases, the lenses, and you know, if they're distorted, which they most likely are, and how you're interpreting the world, question those, and look at the 3 P's of pessimism. And we'll get on to exposure therapy later on. But that's all I got for you right now. See you all in module 6.